All right, welcome in the Sunday pod for the 2025 Players Championship. I'm fired up. I should actually say I'm recording this on a Saturday evening. It's about 8:35 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday night. I just played a wonderful round of golf in beautiful Los Angeles weather. It was 75 and sunny today. The game's starting to trend. I'll tentatively say that in the right direction. I've got a big member next weekend, and there were some real signs of life, I would say, out of my golf game for the first time in what feels like forever. I've only played 6 rounds this year since launching the company. Um, I have the company's taken a lot out of me, and my golf game has definitely suffered. I've not been able to get out for that Tuesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon, Friday morning round that I feel like I used to be able to sneak in the past because I've been giving my blood, sweat, and tears, my heart and soul to this company. And so it was great to get out on the golf course this afternoon, and I think it gave me a lot of energy to do this podcast this evening. A lot of these past weekends, I've just been sitting on my ass on the couch watching golf in the Discord, doing research for the next week's golf tournament all weekend, and it felt good to get outside. And I feel fired up for this one. I'm super ready to talk about it on a Saturday evening, and hopefully the fact that this will now be on your podcast feeds and on YouTube early on Sunday morning, as opposed to when I've been recording it at, I don't know, around 8 or 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is, as you know, obviously 11 or 12 on the East Coast. You have something to listen to and dive into on Sunday morning as we wait for the leaders to tee off at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. Of course, this podcast is presented by Inside Sports Network. I don't think I need to do a whole marketing thing for us every week. Obviously the results speak for themselves. We're really proud of what we've created. And I would say if there's ever a time to give it a shot for a week, the Players is the week to do so. We are going to have wall to wall on the ground reporting for the Players Championship. I'll share a quick, very brief story. We have a guy. I mean, I'm not going to give away his real identity. We refer to him as Utah Stick in the Discord. Uh, but I started getting some DMs last week at, it was, I want to say, Tuesday of Arnold Palmer Invitational week. And I was getting these messages from a guy in our Discord who I haven't really interacted with in the past. I at least didn't recognize his username. But he was sending me just some really like great insights on the golf course conditions, and on what he was seeing with certain players. And I started talking to him, and without really diving into it all, who he was or any of the background, I know all that now after I've spent a lot more time talking to him over the last couple of days. But I was kind of just like, dude, this is amazing stuff. Like the level of insight that you're providing, and it all makes sense now because it turns out that he was a highly competitive junior player like myself, a really good golfer in his own right, and has a big architectural background as well. So we were kind of like two peas in a pod. But anyway, long story short, he started providing our Discord without me even asking him to, with truly some like incredible high level analysis from what he was seeing at Bay Hill. And I take a lot of issue with that type of on the course reporting content when it is done incorrectly. So I already kind of had my guardrails up to begin with. I'm already highly skeptical to this type of stuff, but I gotta hand it to my guy, Utah Stick. He was firing on all cylinders, and particularly Hovland, I gotta give him a huge pat on the back there, because if you listen to my Sunday podcast last week, or actually a lot of the content that I did throughout the week, I was gearing up to tell you guys that this was the week that Hovland starts to show some signs of life. I love the course fit at Bay Hill. I've bet Hovland at Bay Hill in the past. I think when Hovland is operating at his best, Bay Hill is about as good of a golf course as you can get for Victor Hovland. And Utah Stick came in there and was like, dude, he is a absolute mess. Like it is so much worse than you think. I just watched him have a total meltdown on the 17th hole where he was basically throwing his clubs into the water. He had a temper tantrum. And then obviously he was back on the range with 15 different scientists tinkering with his swing. And ultimately it got me to take out all my Hovland exposure in my lineups, as well as so many other ISN subscribers. And we ended up going against him in some matchups. And the point being is like, this guy's doing really, really good work. And it takes a lot for me to put my name behind that and say something like that, because again, I'm highly skeptical to that type of insight in general. And he was awesome. So we're going to do a lot of work with him in the future, and he's going to be back for the players this week as well. So again, this is one very small data point in a million, right? But in terms of like what I've learned is that for some reason or another, people just love like being told that the guy they bet on outright is striping on a Tuesday. And if you, if you want to be told that this week, you will have that opportunity from just like a really smart guy who really understands course conditions and architecture. I thought the information, I like it more for, because course conditions for us is something we go super, super heavy at ISN. Obviously, Steve killed it with the round one props. We identified a huge edge that the scoring average on a lot of these books was way too low, and we hammered a bunch of overs. I think Steve hammered like 12 of them and ended up going 9-3. And I thought personally more so than any of the players that you see, because there's a lot of nuance and context there where you can catch these players for like 30 seconds and it looks horribly, but then you walk to another hole and you miss when they start playing well or something else clicks, right? There's just some stuff you're going to miss there with the players. I thought what he had to say about the golf course conditions was phenomenal. And I think it led me and my team to go even super heavier on, the PM AM wave split, hammering all those overs in round one. And what do you know? It was just another big week at ISN. So this is a great week to check it out, because we are not only going to have our guy, the mysterious, the lore of Utah Stick, back at TPC Sawgrass on Tuesday and Wednesday, joining us on the premium show with all of his thoughts on what he saw Wednesday night. We will also have our team member newsletter coordinator, Josh, will be on the grounds at TPC Sawgrass. Our own Boston Capper will be on the grounds at TPC Sawgrass. It's a huge event for us. We take it really seriously. We're going to have a lot of coverage there. And if you ever want to give it a shot for a week, this is certainly the week to do it. As well for ownership, right? This is a huge Millie Maker. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast are going to be playing in the Millie Maker. Ownership really, really matters. And I have put my heart and soul into our ownership. The ownership at ISN takes me longer than any other part of my week. I spend more time on this ownership than I do even basically researching the golf course nowadays. And it freaking matters. Like you're still having people out there that it's just like 10% off on like guys in the 9K and 10K range. Um, and for something like the Millie Maker, when a lot of decisions are going to be made based on who we think is chalk. I mean, most of the people out there that are looking at bad ownership projections, I've talked to a lot of people that have come over and switch. It's like, how do you even tell who's going to be chalk? That how do you even know who's going to be chalk if the ownership projections that you're using aren't right? It could lead you to make decisions and pivot off players because you think they're going to be highly owned that aren't actually going to be highly owned whatsoever. So I would say this is one of the most important weeks of the year for ownership, particularly if you plan on playing in that Millie Maker. And I can guarantee you this week that you will be in good hands with our ownership. I work my ass off on it. We update it 3 times a week. So you'll get one update on Tuesday. It's not just something where we come in on Wednesday night and are like, here's the ownership. Like, we have constant discussion about it. We update it. I do my first run through on Tuesday afternoon. We do another one on Wednesday morning, and then another one right before our premium show at 8 p.m. on Wednesday evening. So it's just a great week to check us out. I don't have anything too much more to say about it other than we would love to have you as part of this super fun community, and your support means a ton this week. You know, there are a couple weeks a year that casuals play and bet DFS golf, right? It's the majors, and the Players Championship is probably like the fifth most interest that we see from a casual perspective. So these weeks mean a lot to us, you know. So if ISN helps you at all, if it's a part of your process, if this free podcast helps you at all and you want it to keep being free and it's a part of your process, telling a friend, retweeting, spreading the word, that stuff means a whole lot to me, more so this week than any other week outside of really the majors. And it's really encouraging to see that it's working. It's helping people because it's a lot of work. You know, I've put more into this company than I ever could have expected. That's a good thing, right? It's all because we just didn't expect it to turn into so much and have so many subscribers so quickly. But if you know, if this content helps, you know, sharing around the pod this week, the free pod this week, it truly means more than you know. I'm going to dive right in. We have a lot of ground to cover this week. I want to give a fairly in-depth discussion on my opinion on TPC Sawgrass, and I'll give the model too and talk about some of the players. But the reality of the situation is, I really need to see what happens at API tomorrow. I can give you the guys that are rating out well for me statistically, uh, but there's too many high leverage things that could happen at API tomorrow that are really going to affect for me who I want to bet. That, you know, I will give you who I'm leaning towards statistically. But of course, just like every week, like the guys that I give out on the Sunday pod, often they are the guys, a lot of them on my betting card, but I generally end up going in a different direction in DFS, or at least my opinions on certain players evolve and develop throughout the week. And that will certainly be the case this week more so than ever with, you know, our guy Utah Stick and Josh and all of our on the course coverage. But I want to spend a lot of time breaking down my opinion of this golf course, and then we'll run through the model. And I could tell you who's rating out well for me. But truth be told, I have not made any bets. I do not plan on making any bets until the final putt drops at API. Sunday night, I probably will make bets. That's a really good time to be in the Discord because that's when a lot of my research is going to start coalescing once I have that final strokes gain data from the API. I mean, I have an idea right now. I have some guys on my short list. I have a concept of a plan or thoughts on where I'm going, and you'll definitely be able to get that sense when you listen to probably my breakdown of the golf course and the model as well. But let's dive right in. The Players Championship. This is the highest purse in golf. So it's a massive week for one and done, right? If you've been trudging along like I have with a bunch of like T11 finishes and 0 wins and the one and done season, this is kind of the time where you need it. And you could have literally missed the cut in every single one of your one and done picks throughout the beginning of the season. And if you hit it this week, you are right back in it, right? Like this is a week that you really, really need to nail in one and done. And we'll talk quite a bit about strategy over the course of the week in the Discord as well, because I think a lot of people look at it and say, okay, highest purse, most important one and done week. This is the week to pick the best player. And so Scotty Scheffler will most likely be highly owned in one and done. And that's a great one and done option. I'm not going to talk you off that route. But if Scotty Scheffler happens to not win and 20% of the field is on Scotty Scheffler and one and done, and you happen to pick a guy that no one is on in one and done, and he happens to outperform Scotty Scheffler, then obviously I don't need to explain how beneficial that may end up being for you from a leverage standpoint. So TPC Sawgrass, last year, Scotty Scheffler, 20 under par. Easiest players year in the last decade. It was soft. There was not a lot of wind. I had Xander that year. Last year. It was a good, I've gotten crushed at the players in the past, and it's a highly volatile golf tournament. I mean, anybody that tells you that they nail the players every year is completely lying to you, because you're going to have some stinkers at the players. I know that I certainly have. In fact, last year was like my first good year at the players and as long as I can remember, to be honest with you. It was just, I remember it was a really good DFS week because I had a ton of like, my core was like Xander, Siwoo, I remember, because he finished T6. And then I also bet Corey Connors, and I think he did end up sneaking into the top 20 for us, I want to say. But it was a really easy year. The scoring average is minus 0.72. Prior year, Scheffler, 17 under. He was 10-1 that year. It was a lot harder that year. Scoring average was around even par, shade over even par. Prior year, you had Cameron Smith, minus 13 over Anirban Lahiri. Smith won that year at 33-1. That year was even harder. It played 3.5 strokes or 0.35 strokes over par, a little over a quarter stroke over par. Smith's performance at the players was one of the most anomalous wins in statistically and as long as I can remember. Cameron Smith won. Cameron Smith lost like 7 strokes off the tee that week, 6-7 strokes off the tee that week. And I can tell you right now, I am not going to argue that that is ever going to happen again. I think that the Players Championship is a golf course where what you do off the tee is very important, and you can gain a significant advantage by being long and straight off the tee, like we have essentially seen Scotty Scheffler do the last 2 years. Almost not entirely, because he has hit his irons phenomenally well here too. But the advantage that Scheffler has been able to gain off the tee at the Players Championship in the last 2 years, because of his ability to hit the ball straight and because of his ability to hit driver straight on holes that other players are clubbing down, I cannot emphasize enough how important that skill of long and straight has become at this modern overseeded version of the Players Championship. Prior to that, you had Justin Thomas went at 14 under par, 20-1 over Lee Westwood. And then you had Rory McIlroy at 16 under par over Jim Furyk. McIlroy won at 12-1, and the course played, this was an easier year as well. It played half a stroke under par. And the reason why I'm going to stop there is because the golf course changed in 2019. Okay. The Players Championship moved from May to March, and the golf course got overseeded. And I think a lot more, if you're listening to this podcast, you know exactly what overseeded means, but I think a lot more casual fans are beginning to understand what overseeded means as well when they saw what happened to the Honda Classic and how much easier the Honda Classic played when you had an overseed, right? Essentially, what the overseed is going to do, it makes the rough a little bit more consistent. It makes it a little bit softer. It's easier to control your golf ball out of overseeded rough. Whereas if you get dry, patchy Bermuda, there's a lot more variance in the lie that you're going to get. Sometimes the ball sits down in dry Bermuda and you just get absolutely screwed. Almost the same effect happens on the greens, right? When you have greens that are pure Bermuda, they get really dry, they get really baked out. You see the ball start to slide a lot. Whereas if you have the overseed, it's a lot more like carpet. Things are a lot smoother. They're generally running a little bit slower than the firm, it's essentially it's a lot easier to control your golf ball out of the overseed, right? And so, as you can imagine, I had somewhat mixed emotions with the overseed, but in fairness to TPC Sawgrass, in fairness to tournament organizers, is that they knew if they were going to overseed this golf course, that they were going to have to make it a little bit harder as well. So essentially, what happened in 2019, um, it did make the golf course easier, and I'll explain why, but then I'll also talk about some of the changes that have started to make it harder and why I actually think that the players is going to revert back to playing harder this year as opposed to the last year or even the last 2 years. Last year was crazy easy, and we're not gonna get that this year because there's a lot more wind in the forecast. I actually think we're gonna come closer to, like, 2022, 2021, maybe the Cameron Smith year when he won at 13, 14, 15 under par. I'll talk about what I think the scoring average is going to be. But Rory had this to say about the overseed, and I think this is a good way to sum up the difference of how the overseed changes how TPC Sawgrass plays. This is a quote from Rory McIlroy. When you miss the greens, you're not having to contend with the Bermuda. You're not having to guess, how is this going to come out? Whatever. So it lends itself to my aggressive play. And like I said, the addition of the ryegrass overseed mitigates a lot of the unpredictability of Bermuda, and the POA overseed on the greens make the greens roll far more consistently as well. So, as well as the overseed in 2019, there were also some notable design changes that were made to the course before 2019. All of the bunkers were rebuilt. They rebuilt a bunch of the green complexes, right, to allow for more pin position. So, similar to what we talked about last week with the Bay Hill before and after Chris Flynn, you really don't want to look at too much of players' history prior to 2019. And we now have a 5-year sample size of the overseed that, there's a lot that we can learn and draw from over those last 5 years, but I wouldn't put a tremendous amount of stock into data from the Players Championship prior to 2019. Um, Justin Thomas talked about some of the changes as well. Well, I think as I was starting to learn it, it got switched to March. So I kind of had to relearn it. I really, really love this place in May and how firm and fast it would play. Me too, JT. But the PGA Tour wants their golf courses to look greener on the television. And it felt like it was not many drivers. This is a good one because we'll talk about how I think that this is becoming far more of a driver heavy golf course than it has been in the past. I used a 2-iron at this event, and I would just get it on the ground a lot and really focus on hitting the ball in the fairway. I'm still clearly focused on hitting the ball in the fairway because this is a course that if you drive it well, being in March, it's always going to be softer, the fairways and greens, and you can make so many birdies out here. So, TPC Sawgrass, and we'll talk about this with the off the tee stuff. It's still not a driver heavy golf course. I mean, you don't have to hit driver here at all because it's short, but you have seen a trend towards players hitting far more drivers and playing aggressively over the past couple of years, particularly last year when it was really soft. I mean, last year's driver usage percentage shot through the freaking roof. It was the highest driver usage percentage that we've seen in tournament history. And again, I do think we see a little bit of a regression this year because it's not going to be as soft and benign. There's going to be more wind and more decision making off the tee here. But this is still trending in the direction, particularly with the overseed, of being a golf course that players are going to play more aggressively at. Now, it still features a really high missed fairway penalty. This is still a big time accuracy matters golf course. It really is. And we'll talk about that. a little bit more off the tee. But there were some more changes that were made to TPC Sawgrass this year that I think is going to fly under the rug and not a lot of people are going to talk about, but they've changed the golf course again. This year, they lengthened 3 out of the 4 par 5 holes, which was very necessary. I mean, some of the par 5 holes at TPC Sawgrass were just too short, and we started to see last year players hit 7, 6 iron coming into the par 5s. I mean, the par 5s at TPC Sawgrass they're now 555, 573, 538. That's still really short for a modern par 5. Also, the par 4 6 hole has been lengthened, which is now measuring 413 yards. So in total, a lengthening of 77 yards has been added to the golf course before this year of the players. So, I mean, we should expect slightly more long irons on the par 5s. I would say the proximity buckets might get bumped up a little bit, where some of those shots from 175 to 200 yards that the longer hitters were having on the par 5s are probably going to get bumped back closer to 200 yards. The other thing to mention, this is huge. And again, shout out my guy, Twitterless Steve, who brought this to my attention yesterday. The GSCAA sheet is reporting 4-inch rough this year. That's important. Look at the GSCAA sheet. A lot of people don't even know the GSCAA. The reason I'm like saying it very slowly is because I call it the GCSAA sheet every single time, and it actually is the GSCAA sheet. But anyway, you get the point. It's the sheet that tells you about the golf course agronomy. This is widely available to the public every single week. I would still say most people talking golf don't read it every week. 4-inch rough this year. Okay. So, the last 2 years, it was 3.5. That looks to me like a concerted effort, at least from tournament organizers, to grow the rough up a little bit more this year. Now, why would they do that? I don't know. Maybe, hopefully, our voice is mattering on Twitter. I'm dubious of that. I'm like making a joke. I do not actually think that the PGA Tour is listening to us, the fans, on Twitter. Although my tweets about negative PGA National and positive Bay Hill course conditions have gotten like close to 500,000 impressions between the two. So hopefully they're taking some notice, but for whatever reason, it appears that tournament organizers are at least making somewhat of a concerted effort after an extremely easy last year to say, we're going to push back a little bit. We're going to fight back a little bit. And even if they didn't grow the rough up at all, even if they kept the same rough that they had last year, the golf course is going to play harder than last year no matter what, because you're going to get more wind this year. You're going to get a little bit of a cold front. And, we will hammer the course conditions like our life depends on it. Like that's our entire thing at ISN, is telling you exactly how the golf course is going to play on what day. So be sure to stay in touch in the Discord for updates. But I can tell you how I think the golf course is going to play now as I sit here on Saturday evening, a couple of days out. A lot can change, but the Jacksonville area has been dry recently. There hasn't been a ton of rain. There's not a ton of rain in the forecast for tournament week, if any. So as I sit here again on Saturday evening, 5 days before the tournament starts, I think dry conditions and moderate wind with a little bit thicker rough than last year. Saturday looks like kind of the worst day. Again, my guess is that maybe with the positive response to how difficult the API is played this week and the naturally drier conditions, the players is going to revert back to a golf tournament that plays over par. Like I said, maybe the Cameron Smith year when he won it 0.3 strokes over par, and we get a 13 to 15 under winner. The last 2 years, we've got 17 under par and 20 under par. And last year, we almost got multiple players shoot 20 under par. I'm telling you right now, that's not happening. Don't model this golf course like that. This is not this tournament, unless something crazy happens with the weather. And like, there's things that I see about the golf course setup from people on the grounds that look completely different to what I'm seeing and hearing right now as I record this podcast. This tournament is not going to be one at 20 under par. In fact, it's probably going to be one closer to 15 under par. I still think somebody probably shoots 15 or 16, maybe 17 under par, but I would say scoring average wise, last year it played minus 0.7. The Cam Smith year it played plus 0.35. I think it's closer to the plus 0.35 personally than I do the minus 0.7. So how does that change our breakdown, right? Well, there are a couple things to consider here, right? The missed fairway penalty is still really high at TPC Sawgrass, right? And, even with 4-inch rough, even if that gets chopped down a little bit, last year when the golf course played super easy, it was still a really difficult golf course off the tee. Okay. And that's only going to get harder this year. Historically, TPC Sawgrass has been one of the most biased golf courses on tour in terms of accuracy over distance. It really has. I mean, the last 2 years specifically, we have seen a far stronger correlation with accuracy over distance. So that's the thing that you have to keep in mind about TPC Sawgrass is that even with the overseeded rough, even with the ability of players to be a little bit more aggressive with driver here, there is still water on basically every hole on this golf course that comes into play on basically every hole off the tee and on approach, right? And so this has, and the rough is thick at TPC Sawgrass. Okay. Even with the overseed, I don't think it's going to be quite like Bay Hill last week, but we'll get eyes on it. We'll have people talking to us about what it looks like, and we'll have a really good sense of how this rough compares to Bay Hill. But it's one of the toughest driving tests on tour. It really is. I mean, it is ranked inside the top 4 in off the tee difficulty each of the last 5 years. And I know, like, you could say, well, the golf course isn't that long, so you can club down off the tee. And that's true. And that's why this is not as tough of a driving test as Bay Hill and Muirfield Village, because Bay Hill and Muirfield Village, which also feature very thick rough, a fair amount of water, and a really high missed fairway penalty, those golf courses don't really allow you to club down because those golf courses are so long. So if you're a shorter player, like, you basically have to hit driver, as you see often at Bay Hill. And if you don't hit driver, you're going to have crazy, crazy long approach shots at Bay Hill. TPC Sawgrass is a little bit different. TPC Sawgrass is not a long golf course. In fact, a lot of the par 4s at TPC Sawgrass and even the par 5s, if you're really squirrely with the driver, are not super long. So, the one thing that I would say about TPC Sawgrass that is important here is if somebody's wild with their driver, there's still a roadmap for them to play smart and win at TPC Sawgrass. Like, Justin Thomas and Cameron Smith are not accurate drivers of the ball, particularly with their driver. And I don't even want to talk about the Cameron Smith thing because that was like such an anomalously absurd year. But you take somebody like Justin Thomas, for example, and Justin Thomas can hit 2-iron on this golf course all day because he's long enough off the tee that he can find fairways. However, somebody like he can find fairways and still have medium to short iron in. However, somebody like Scotty Scheffler, and this is what you're starting to see more people do, because last year the driver usage percentage was 67%, which is tour average now. So it's tour average driver usage percentage. In the past, years in the past, when it's super windy, it's like 48% driver usage percentage. Okay. So You can no longer call this a true club down or positional golf course. I think what the trend is becoming is what Scotty Scheffler has done, where his ability to be long and straight and thread the needle with driver has been such a fucking insane advantage. Like, he ranked first in driving accuracy last year and 14th in distance. That is a cheat code at this golf course. And we'll talk about how important recent approach play is, but TPC Sawgrass is not a second shot golf course. TPC Sawgrass is a position a position B golf course. What you do off the tee at TPC Sawgrass matters. Doesn't matter as much as your second shot. And there's ways that you can get out of, like, there's nowhere to hide on the second shot at TPC Sawgrass. Either you're a good approach player or you're not. And at least off the tee, you can hide a little bit. Like, if you're somebody like Wyndham Clark who hits the ball a mile and you're feeling squirrely with the driver, you can hit 2-iron out there all day and win the Players Championship. Whereas approach play, like, there's nowhere to freaking hide. Either you're a good approach player on, like, either you're hitting the green on 17 or you're not. But if you have the ability to hit the ball long and straight like Scotty Scheffler, and Matt Fitzpatrick did this too last year. Matt Fitzpatrick was like his best off the tee week of his career, where he ranked, he was like second. He was second in accuracy that week, second strokes off the tee. But that advantage is so massive for somebody like Scotty Scheffler. And this is the same reason also why Scheffler has an advantage at Bay Hill and Muirfield Village, like I talked about, is because his accuracy and above average distance is just so fucking lethal at a golf course with a high miss fairway penalty. Okay. And TPC Sawgrass has one of the top 5 highest miss fairway penalties on tour. And I would still say that his advantage off the tee at TPC Sawgrass is still slightly less than Muirfield Village and Bay Hill. It's a little bit smaller here because the golf course not as long as Muirfield Village and Bay Hill. So this golf course doesn't penalize the lack of length that a golf course like Muirfield Village or Bay Hill does. But this is not a golf course where off the tee is devalued. It is a golf course where you can gain a significant advantage off the tee. Particularly with your accuracy, you can gain such an advantage on this golf course with being long and straight. And I would 100%, I created my own off the tee model for Sawgrass, but I would 100% focus in on finding guys that are highly accurate drivers of the ball. Like, it's really important. And if they have length too, it's huge. It's really huge. At the end of the day, I'm still going to have approach play as the number one key indicator for success at TPC Sawgrass. And it's the same deal with Cognizant, right? And I don't this is a different golf course than Cognizant. Although Cognizant is similar in a lot of ways, both aesthetically, agronomically, there's some similarities with the leaderboards and the architecture, the water heavy nature of it. But like Cognizant, this current overseeded version of PGA National is all approach and putting. TPC Sawgrass is all about accuracy and approach off the tee and short game. It's a golf course where putting is devalued, in my opinion. And this is why you've seen poor players win the Players Championship in the past. The easiest aspect of TPC Sawgrass is once you get on the greens. The driving is hard. The approach play is hard. The par threes are hard. The short game is hard. It has really difficult bunkers. Okay. It's hard to get up and down at TPC Sawgrass. It has difficult coffin bunkers. It has thick greenside rough. It has a lot of mounding. Pete Dye is famous for this greenside mounding where he has these chocolate drops and humps and hollows. And if you miss greens at TPC Sawgrass, which you're going to do as a low-ish greens and regulation percentage, because the greens, the greens and regulation percentage is on the lower side. So you are going to have to rely on your short game at least somewhat. the around the green skill at TPC Sawgrass is really difficult as well. So a golf course like Cognizant, where you want to focus on approach and putting big time, TPC Sawgrass is a lot more similar to our handicap of Bay Hill in many ways, where Bay Hill is like total driving, long irons, and like scrambling a little bit. TPC Sawgrass is accuracy, overall approach play. Like it is very evenly distributed at TPC Sawgrass. Middle irons are the most important. You're going to have the most middle irons on this golf course. I would focus on the middle irons the most, but what makes TPC Sawgrass so good is you're going to hit every club in your bag, right? You're going to have to hit 4 to 5 really high leverage long iron shots. You're going to have to hit 3 to 4 really high leverage wedge shots, right? Think about 17, right? And a couple of the short par fours that you need to score on. So at Sawgrass, I mean, the thing that you really want to be looking for, in my opinion, is accuracy or overall recent approach play, number one. Iron play is foolproof. Who's hitting their irons well right now is foolproof. The easiest road map to win TPC Sawgrass. Number one, are you a good iron player? It could mask anything else. Just ask Cam Smith. Cam Smith was amazing on approach the year that he was driving it everywhere, and his irons still got him out of everything, right? JT, Hideki's the most consistent player at the Players Championship over the last 10 years has been Hideki Matsuyama. And you want to know who's been like 2, 3, 4? It's like Tommy Fleetwood, Justin Thomas, Shane Lowry. Okay. Particularly with Hideki, what do Hideki and Justin Thomas have in common? Great approach players, great short games, and they can club down off the tee if they want to. They don't have, well, obviously Scheffler's number one above all of them because he has that off the tee advantage. But like, if you don't have the Scheffler off the tee advantage, approach play and short game. This is a golf course where I think that the greens are pretty easy, comparatively speaking. And I'm lower on putting this week than I normally would be. But I think that short game, it's one of the sneakiest, toughest short game courses on the PGA Tour. Like I think it's a very underrated aspect about TPC Sawgrass that I really think matters. And I would weight short game a lot heavier than I would putting. And then, gosh, we're already at 42 minutes. It was a good course breakdown though. Kind of got in the zone there for a little bit. The final thing that I would say about course history at TPC Sawgrass, I'm not going to do a whole thing on the comp courses either. Okay. If you want to know what comp courses I'm thinking of, you can find my model on the rabbit hole, or you can hop in the Discord, talk about it. I think there's a lot of irresponsible comp coursing going on right now. I mean, don't get me started on the AI comp course stuff. It's a freaking joke. And we will continue to fight that battle with ball knowing at ISN, but the AI comp course shit fucking shows. Stop telling on yourself with that bullshit. Okay. There's a lot of irresponsible comp coursing to TPC Sawgrass. And so, I kind of created my own group that I think I call it like the Sawgrass fingerprints, because there's a lot of golf courses that people are like, oh, short positional. This is so much like Sawgrass, and it's not. Or, oh, Pete Dye, like American Express, like same architecture. No, that architecture the way that players attack that architecture in Palm Springs interacts completely differently. That's a putting contest. It doesn't, players don't attack that golf course and play that golf course at all in the same way that they play TPC Sawgrass. But a place like Muirfield Village, for example, architecturally, it's like and in terms of required skill set, it's like very similar to what you have to do at TPC Sawgrass, right? Like you have to do the same things at Muirfield Village well. And they're very similar golf course in terms of what you have to do. That's not a comp course that anyone would think about or talk about. They would be like, PGA West or I don't know, TPC River Highland, Pete Dye golf courses, right? And there's in some cases, right? But there's a lot of nuance involved in terms of how these golf courses are actually playing and what type of skill set you want to be looking for. So I put all that list together. Thing I would say about course history, it's got some of the least predictive course history on the PGA Tour. Okay. And that's largely because there's a lot of variance on this golf course. You know, it's really dependent on form, right? I mean, this is not a golf course where you just show up here and because you've played well here in the past, you're going to play well here again. Doesn't work that way. It's very hard to show up here and perform based on institutional knowledge. It's too exposing of an execution test, right? So this is why we rarely ever see a player that performs here every single year, right? Every single guy, whether it's Scotty Scheffler or Justin Thomas or Hideki, whatever, there's clunkers in there. Okay. Like Rory McIlroy is one where he's missed like 5-6 cuts here, but he also has, 4 or 5 top 12 finishes. Hideki, Siwoo, Sergio, all these guys have clunkers. Justin Thomas, Xander Schauffele, great TPC Sawgrass players. They've missed 4 of their last 8 cuts here with, almost 2 wins, right? So nothing here is guaranteed. But you want to see the golf course, right? It's not easy for first timers either. Last year, Ludwig was the only first timer, and Ludwig first time on golf courses is like, he's does some really special stuff. Like he finished runner up on his debut at the Masters too. Ludwig was the only guy that played well as a first timer last year. Every single player in the top 10 last year had played in at least 3 players championships. It's very rare for a player to contend on their first appearance. So experience matters. I don't want to play first timers, but I would never value course history over form here. And even players with poor course history suddenly figure it out all the time. Okay. Xander, Hatton, Scotty, Wyndham, Fitzpatrick, Sahith, Matt McNeely. Those guys are all recent examples of guys that stunk at TPC Sawgrass and then suddenly played well. Okay. Let's take a quick break and then I'm going to run through my model. Okay, we are back. Let's run through the top 20 of my model. Number 1, and there's a big gap here, Scotty Scheffler. Scotty Scheffler is at number 1 in your model. Deeply unserious at this golf course. Deeply, deeply unserious at this golf course. I don't think that this is as perfect for him as Bay Hill or Muirfield Village. I think it's right below that. I think that the best 2 golf courses for Scotty Scheffler on the PGA Tour are Bay Hill and Muirfield Village. I think third best is TPC Sawgrass. And fourth best is Augusta, actually. Sawgrass better golf course for Scheffler than Augusta because Sawgrass tests accuracy more than Augusta does. Number 2, Justin Thomas. Boy, he made a lot of people angry today. And I can't blame him. I think everybody's had their experience with Justin Thomas this year. I bet him 1 time this year. So I haven't been hurt enough to the point that I wouldn't go back here for him this week. I bet him at Pebble and it was a disaster. Bad bet that week. And then let's go down the list. Well, Russell Henley, number 3. What do we do with the guy? Russell Henley is a perfect golf course for Russell Henley. And I made a joke about this on Twitter. Russell Henley has the perfect skill profile for TPC Sawgrass. If I was building a golf course in a lab for Russell Henley, I'd build TPC Sawgrass. And he has 0 top 10s in 11 appearances. He's a couple top 20s, but 0 top 10s in 11 appearances. Now, Russell Henley is 1 stroke back at the API. And I gotta say, I didn't play Russell Henley this week. I didn't bet him. I had him the prior week at the Honda, where he had a share of the lead on the back nine. And I don't know what's going to happen with Russell Henley tomorrow. I can tell you, as somebody who's bet Russell Henley quite a bit, um, be prepared for anything. I'm also going to tell you, I have never been the type of person that believes that somebody like Russell Henley can't win or can't break through. If anything, the contrary, right? I mean, because I was one of the longtime Xander defenders about this guy is so good across the board that he is going to put himself in the mix more regularly than any golfer in the world outside of Scotty Scheffler. And eventually, just by accident, he's going to start falling backwards into wins. I do not think that Russell Henley is Xander Schauffele, but Russell Henley has been a top 10 to 15 player in the world statistically for the last 12 to 24 months. I mean, he has been over a large sample size, one of the best golfers in the world at the efficiency by which he gets the ball in the hole. And as you saw with Xander Schauffele, just when everybody reached their breaking point, and it was around this time last year, I remember I had Xander at the Players too, and everybody lost their frickin' minds about Xander blowing it at the Players. Rightfully so. He did blow it at the Players. And then what happened next? The people that stuck around for one more month, not me. Xander won 2 of the next 4 majors, and kind of became bona fide the second or third best player in the world, with 2 majors under his belt. So the thing that I would remind people with Russell Henley is that the data is so strong with him, particularly at golf courses like these, that it's going to happen. I strongly believe that it will happen. I don't know if it will happen this week. I just don't know what your tolerance is for Henley. I hopped off this week. I didn't like Bay Hill. Bay Hill is a good fit for Henley, and I'm kind of an idiot, to be honest with you. Like, it wasn't like he wasn't rating out well for me statistically. I kind of just said Honda took a lot out of him. We're buying high now. I mean, not really. It's a good number at Bay Hill. It was a bad no bet by me. And I didn't play him in DFS either. He was getting a lot of ownership too. And I was like, gosh, you guys are all sticking with Russell Henley at a much longer golf course for him. His accuracy is still going to be really helpful at Bay Hill, but he will be a little bit behind the 8 ball, with some of those long irons compared to the middle irons that he's going to get this week at TPC Sawgrass. I don't really know I don't really know how people are going to assess Russell Henley at Sawgrass, because either he's going to win tomorrow and he'll be like mega chalk, or he'll lose in heartbreaking fashion, and maybe that will make people want to bet him more. I don't know. But it's as close to a perfect golf course for him as it gets. For Rory, and a lot of people don't think he's won with the overseed. There are better golf courses out there for Rory McIlroy, but it's not like he can't win there. 5, Tommy Fleetwood. Tommy Fleetwood, I bet this week at the API, 30-1. It's a really bad bet. We kind of made the joke. It's like, you can bet Tommy once a year. This is a Kyle Hewitt original. You can bet Tommy Fleetwood once a year, and you don't deserve shit from anyone. Like, you can use your one Tommy Fleetwood swipe a year, and it's fair. You're allowed to do it. The second you bet him more than once a year, you deserve criticism and scrutiny. And as soon as I saw the numbers start to filter in and Tommy's playing well this week. Like, he's doing what Tommy does. He's gaining in ball striking categories. Tommy's hitting his irons insanely well at the moment. He's not putting well. And TPC Sawgrass is an even better golf course for him than Bay Hill, because it's shorter. So, I already used my Tommy swipe. I love him at Sawgrass, but I don't think I could bet him. Patrick Cantlay, number 6. I don't know, man. I don't know. I liked him a lot last week. I didn't watch a ton of him. Like, I haven't gone in and done an autopsy totally of like what went wrong with Cantlay. I haven't dived deep into the numbers yet at Bay Hill because I've been so hyper focused on like the research of the modeling and golf course of Sawgrass. Cantlay had a good round 1 at Bay Hill, and he's just been a mess the last 3 days. And it just feels like it's 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards with Patrick Cantlay. And I guess the only thing is that you can hang your hat on is he's done being in the 20-1 range. I bet him at 30 last week. I would imagine maybe he hits 40 this week at the Players like he should. I don't understand for the life. I mean, he isn't one. We'll talk about, but JT, Colin, and Cantlay, and I'll talk about it right now with Colin because Colin's 9th in my model. And it's interesting. I'm like somewhat happy with how the API is played out in a way because I already liked JT in a vacuum more than Colin at the Players. And so what happened with Colin at the Players, at this week at API, he had that amazing round on Saturday, and he's probably going to win the API or come very close to it. I thought the Colin number at the Players was like the worst bet on the board. Truly. I mean, Colin is 16-1 to win a full field event. I repeat, Colin, who has not won a golf tournament in over 500 days, is 16-1 to win a full field event, the second hardest, strongest field in golf. 16-1, 500 days. Here's the kicker. I think people think that Colin is a good players guy because he should be accurate off the tee, right? Makes so much sense for him on paper. Great iron player. Colin Morikawa has not been good at the Players. Okay. His course history is mid at best. Now, that could change in a second at the Players, but like, why is Colin 16-1 at the Players? Now, if he here's what happens tomorrow. Let's say he wins the API. Then he either stays 16-1 and becomes 14-1, and no one's going to bet him anyway because he can't, because he can't, he's not going to win back to back, right? He's not going to win API and Players back to back. But let's say he loses tomorrow. Let's say it looks bad. And if he loses tomorrow, it means that he blew the golf tournament most likely to Russell Henley or Corey Connors, who are not held in the highest regard, let's say, by bettors. Then does Colin get to 20-1? Like, that's where I'm like, okay, let's just see what happens tomorrow, because either he wins and he doesn't go back to back, or he blows it and the number has got to get worse, right? Because I just think Colin under 20-1 is insanity. Insanity. You want to tell me Colin 22-1 to win the Players? Now we're talking. It's a great course fit for him too, but I don't think he should be he should be third on the odds board, I suppose, if he wins, right? But then if he wins, are we betting him to go back to back? Probably not. It's a big ask. He's a 1 in 2.5 years. Now he's going to go back to back at API and the Players. So I think what for me is, I get it. I like Colin. I probably need a 22, and I would want him to I'd want him to look good, but not win. And for at least to him be above 20. Right. And that's kind of how I feel about JT is, right. It's like, this is such a good field. Okay. It's a full field. And that's why I may not even end up betting anybody in the 20 range, is because Colin and JT in the last month were both widely available to win signature events at 25-1, 24-1. Colin was 24, 25-1 at the Genesis. JT was available at 28-1 this week. So how are 16 and 18 or 20-1 good numbers in a field with double the players where anything can happen? I don't think the Colin and JT numbers are that good. I think you're paying a premium to bet those guys at short numbers, and they never freaking win. Hideki's really interesting to me. Hideki's been unbelievable at the players. If you can get a 30-1 on Hideki, that's a great number. Let's run through the rest of my model. Hideki 7, Xander 8, Colin 9. And, I'm pretty on point with the odds board. The only discrepancy there is I'm a lot lower on Ludwig than consensus. I have Ludwig 23 in my model. My model's not supposed to represent the odds board. And it's not a clear win probability, right? So if Ludwig's 23rd in my model and somebody else is 14, that doesn't mean I think his win prob is lower. I create a separate metric for win prob. But what it does show me is what the major discrepancies are. It creates a baseline for me statistically. And I have Berger 10, Straka 11. I'm not a Straka guy, and I think there's a great spot for Straka. Watch out for the popularity, though. 12, Siwoo Kim. Love me Siwoo at the players. Super accurate driver of the ball. Great golf course for Siwoo Kim. He was a core play for me last year. Love him here. 13, Sungjae, who is disappointing as shit this week again. I bet a 50-1 on Sungjae last week. Just a shit bet again. Like that's what I'm saying. Like, listen to me on this stuff, on the numbers being good and bad with a grain of salt, because I feel like my process is as good as it's ever been, and my positionals and matchups and course conditions are great. And I know everybody is struggling with this, so hopefully I maybe shouldn't be too hard for myself. But in terms of picking the guy that wins the fucking golf tournament, it's been fucking hard this year, guys. Really fucking hard finding a guy who wins the golf tournament. And then the past 2 weeks, I've had a guy leading the golf tournament on the back nine on Sunday. This week, I don't have a fucking prayer because I don't have Henley, Colin, or Connors. But I did bet Sungjae at 50-1. That was a great use of my money. 14, my guy Doug Gim. Watch out for the chalk. I mean, we were on him at 3% at the Cognizant when he finished T11. This is kind of the classic jump off point, right? When everybody else hops on. But then again, like, another mistake that I made this week is like, Lowry has been like a superstar for us, 8 to 10% at 8K. And I saw the ownership creeping up, and I was like, Lowry's going to be one of the most popular plays on the board. I'm going to hop off because he's double the ownership at what I'm used to playing. And Lowry's a good play this week, right? So I'm not saying hop off Doug Gim, but watch out for the ownership. He's really underpriced. Adam Scott, Shane Lowry, Brian Harmon, Ben Griffin, Tom Kim, Lucas Glover, Aaron Rye. Obviously, Aaron Rye will be a popular bet at 100-1. That's it for me. So no early leans. I don't really know who's going to win the players as of now. We'll talk about it quite a bit more in the Discord, and we'll have to see where the numbers come in at the API. As always, if this helped you at all, it's a big week, hopefully, for the casuals to get involved with golf betting and DFS. Love if you share the pod around, spread the word. I think that we have the stuff that we're doing at ISN, I'm really proud of, and we're really helping people win a lot of money and beat the Bucks on this with some real edges on things that people weren't, previously talked about. And, in golf betting and DFS is like our main ethos and philosophy is the golf course matters. All right. That's like our company motto. And if you can figure out how the golf course is going to play, like if you can figure out exactly how the golf course is going to play, which is what we spend our entire time doing, then you can make money every single week doing this, and we'll continue to do so. So we'd love to have you join us for the week. Good luck with your bets at the API tomorrow. I'm kind of like rooting for my guy Russell, even though, I quote unquote don't want to miss it. I just, he's a data boy. I love my data boys, and I would love to see him win for the data boys, even if it isn't making my bank account any richer. In fact, with the DFS lineups that I do have a chance to turn some sort of profit for me, what I really need more than anything else is like Scheffler and Aaron Rye and Rory to go freaking nuclear tomorrow, and like Russ to fall back. But anyway, point being is that's it for me. Best of luck with your bets tomorrow. Hope to see you in that Discord at ISN. Reach out to me if you have any questions whatsoever. You shoot me a DM in the Discord. And cheers. Cheers. Let's have a good one. Happy Players Week.